Hello there, and welcome back to All About Earth, where science drifts like mist through time and curiosity finds a soft place to rest. Wherever you are tonight, maybe the city lights are fading, or maybe you're wrapped in a quiet blanket of countryside stars, I invite you to travel with me, not just back through centuries, but through millions upon millions of years, into a world that once breathed without a single bird. The world then was warm and lush. Forests of ferns and conifers stretched to the horizon, no flowers, no grass, just an ocean of ancient green. In the distance, sauropods moved like living hills, their necks sweeping the treetops, their tails carving arcs through mist. Nearby, allosaurs hunted through shadows, eyes glinting in the dim light. When they roared, it was the sound of the earth itself, remembering its strength. Above them, pterosaurs ruled the sky, vast, leathery wings catching sunlight, silent except for the rush of wind. They were the first masters of air, but they were not birds, because in this age there were no birds yet. Still, evolution was quietly at work. In the undergrowth, small theropods, no bigger than crows, darted between roots and ferns. Their bodies were wrapped in soft down, not yet feathers, just delicate warmth against the chill of nights. Quick, clever, and restless, they hunted insects and scavenged what the giants left behind. In their bones and sinew, something new was forming. Lighter frames, longer arms, a hint of balance that seemed to reach upward. If you could stand there now, amid the towering trees, the heavy air, the thunder of footsteps, you might not notice them. But they were there, small, bright sparks of change flickering in a world of giants. No songs yet, no wings, just a whisper of what was coming. The first quiet step toward flight. So close your eyes and picture it. The forest breathing, the sky heavy with pterosaurs, the ground trembling with titans, and hidden in the ferns, a handful of tiny dreamers preparing to inherit the wind. If that world stirred something in you, share your thoughts, tap like, and subscribe. Our journey to the sky has only just begun. The first feathers, the dawn of down. If you listen closely to the wind that drifts through time, you might still catch a faint rustle, the whisper of soft fibers brushing against ancient ferns, long before the sky filled with birds, before flight or song, before feathers stretched like sails across the air. There was something gentler, a shimmer of down, the first threads of warmth spun by evolution itself. In the heart of the Jurassic world, the air is heavy and warm by day, but the nights tell a different story. As the sun sinks behind the volcanic ridges, the heat drains quickly from the forests. Mist gathers in the valleys, curling low around the roots of cycads and towering pines. The air cools, the shadows deepen, and life must adapt or shiver. Here beneath the canopy, small theropods stir, creatures the size of a cat, slender and bright-eyed. They move with care, weaving between ferns and fallen logs, their limbs quick and light. But what sets them apart from their colossal cousins isn't size or speed, it's something subtler, softer, almost invisible in the half-light. A coat of fine filaments like wisps of smoke or threads of sunrise clinging to their bodies. These are the first feathers, though not yet feathers as we know. They are primitive and simple, delicate strands without the structure for flight. And yet, they are a revolution. Each tiny filament is a promise, spun from survival. When night falls and the temperature dips, these fibers trap the air close to the skin, creating a thin, invisible shield. It isn't perfect, but it's enough. Enough to let these small predators stay active longer, to move through the dusk when others retreat to the warmth of the soil or the shelter of trees. Heat means life, and these early tufts of down are life's quiet invention against the cold breath of darkness. By day, they serve another purpose. The forests of the Jurassic are alive with color, mosses and lichens spreading in muted greens and rusts, fern leaves catching stray beams of gold. Among this dappled light, the down glimmers softly, blending with the tones of bark and soil. These small theropods do not roar or thunder. They survive by vanishing. The soft filaments on their skin scatter light, breaking the shape of their bodies into gentle shadow. From a distance, they melt into the forest floor, camouflage, born not of choice but necessity. Among them, perhaps the most striking of all is a creature known to us as Sinosauropteryx, though no such name existed in its own age. Imagine it now, a sleek little hunter, its body dusted with fine filaments of red and orange, like embers caught in motion. The color isn't just decoration, it's life's experiment and signaling. In the quiet arms of evolution, these tones serve two masters, concealment and allure. Against the autumn palette of the forest floor, the reddish hues help it blend into the earth and fallen leaves. But under certain light, when the air grows still and another of its kind approaches, that same color might shimmer, a hint, a call, a spark of attraction. Because survival isn't only about hiding, it's about being seen at the right moment, by the right eyes. Perhaps on a cool Jurassic morning, a pair of these small creatures meets by a river's edge. The water runs slow and copper in the dawn light. One pauses, head tilted, its down catching the sun like threads of flame. The other watches, curious, cautious, drawn. There is no song, no flutter of wings, just the quiet exchange of gaze and movement. A ritual written in instinct and color. The first courtship displays may have been like this, subtle, wordless, stitched together by light and the soft shimmer of warmth. And so, in this forest of giants, evolution begins to weave art into survival. These filaments, born from the need to keep warm, begin to shape behavior, to carry meaning. Nature, ever the patient sculptor, uses the same tool, a single filament, to both protect and communicate. Each thread, each hair-like strand, is a delicate experiment in adaptation. When you imagine them, those early down-covered theropods, try not to think of the sleek, sharp scales we often picture on dinosaurs. Instead, think of softness. Imagine brushing your fingers through air that feels alive with a faint electric warmth. Like fur made of sunlight, these fibers shimmer faintly when the breeze moves through them, catching particles of dust and light. The animals themselves might not understand the gift they carry, but the planet does. The earth remembers the need that gave birth to them, the long nights, the slow cooling, the quiet urgency to keep the spark of life alive. These filaments also tell a deeper story, one of continuity. Long before birds soared, long before mammals curled into dens, the idea of insulation was already unfolding in miniature. Life was learning to hold itself together against the cold. The difference between warmth and chill was the difference between motion and stillness, between hunger and death. And so from the same raw material that once built scales, nature began to spin threads, threads of protection, of color, of future flight. Even in the daylight, when the sun warms the forest floor, the down plays its quiet role. It cushions movement, softens outlines, and perhaps even carries the faint scent of the earth, helping its wearer vanish among roots. When these small creatures dart between the leaves, they move like whispers, quick, fluid, unseen. Their soft coats stir the dust, but leave no echo. And yet, there must have been moments of stillness too, moments when a young theropod would pause in a patch of sunlight, close its eyes, and feel the warmth of its own tiny body, held by those simple filaments, a body no longer at the mercy of the night. The first comfort in the long history of life. We often think of evolution as struggle, claws, teeth, speed, strength, but sometimes it moves gently, sometimes it arrives in silence, as warmth. These early filaments are not weapons, nor tools of conquest. They are the softest kind of power, endurance, through tenderness. And if you were to watch the world from above, perhaps from the shadow of a pterosaur gliding in the high blue air, you would see them scattered below like moving brushstrokes, small lives tracing patterns through the forest. In a world of predators, they are humble survivors, but in their quiet invention they have already changed everything. Because these filaments are not just adaptations, they are beginnings, the first step in a long chain of transformation that will one day lift descendants of these creatures into the sky. But here in the heart of the Jurassic, no one could have guessed that these tufts of warmth were never meant for flight. They were meant to keep a heartbeat alive through the night, to hide from eyes that hunt, to shimmer just enough to be seen by another. Evolution never announces its intentions. It doesn't know that one day these soft filaments will become the architecture of wings, the design of plumage, the signature of song, For now, they are enough. They are beautiful simply because they were. Imagine the scene one last time. Twilight deepens in the forest. The first stars begin to tremble above the treetops. The giant sauropods settle into stillness, their breath rising like mist. The air cools, and the small theropods tuck themselves beneath leaves, their down wrapping them in silence and safety. A red-orange glint, barely visible, flickers once before darkness folds it away. This is how flight begins, not with soaring or strength, but with warmth, with the need to endure. In that quiet, tender act of survival, the earth took its first step toward the sky. And if you could whisper back across the ages to those little down-covered creatures, perhaps you would say, "You don't know it yet, but the air already belongs to you." The painted feathers, a turning point of color and flight. The Jurassic forests have aged into the early Cretaceous. The air is still warm, still fragrant with resin and fern, but something in the light has changed. The sun feels sharper now, filtering through younger leaves and fresher trees. The world hums with possibility. Where once small creatures wrapped themselves in simple softness to endure the cold, new generations shimmer with complexity. Feathers have evolved, not just as warmth, but as wonder. If you were to walk quietly through these ancient woods, you might see it, the flicker of iridescence, a brief flare of color between branches. Something small darts across your vision and vanishes again, not running this time, but gliding, suspended for a heartbeat in the air. The creature lands on a branch, claws curling delicately around the bark. The light touches it, and for an instant, the forest becomes a cathedral of shimmer. Its feathers glint in hues of black and blue, oil slick and dreamlike. This is Microraptor, a messenger between worlds, half earthbound hunter, half whisper of the sky. Feathers now are no longer the fine, simple filaments of their ancestors. They have deepened, divided, unfolded into astonishing intricacy. Each one grows from a central shaft, splitting into veins, then into countless smaller branches that knit together like threads of silk. They interlock with precision. Tiny hooks, delicate as eyelashes, binding them into smooth, continuous surfaces. What was once a coat of warmth has become architecture, an invention that bends air itself. Yet these new feathers are not only for flight. They are mirrors, paintings, instruments of light. In them, pigments and microscopic structures scatter sunlight, creating colors that shift and gleam with every movement. Some shimmer with metallic blues and purples. Others carry deep shades of bronze, emerald, or onyx. When the wind moves through them, they catch fire in motion. Nature, it seems, has begun to play with art. The forest floor glows in patches, where sunlight breaks through the canopy. And there, in those golden pools, color becomes language. These small feathered theropods, nimble and clever, begin to use their plumage, not only to survive, but to communicate. When danger stirs, the shadow of an allosaur prowling in the distance, they flatten their feathers, darkening, stilling their shimmer. But when the forest is calm, when the air hums with insects and the smell of wet earth rises, they display. Feathers spread, tails fan, wings unfold. It is both beauty and strategy, a show to attract, to warn, to belong. What began as insulation has become expression. Imagine a microraptor in the half-light of dawn. It crouches on a high branch, four limbs cloaked in layered feathers, each limb edged with flight surfaces, not true wings as we know them, but extensions of possibility. With a flick of its hind legs, it leaps into the air. For a moment, gravity claims it. Then the feathers catch the air, bending, flexing, slowing its fall. It does not fly, it glides, a living leaf on invisible currents. It tilts, drifts, then lands again with the soft sound of leaves brushing bark. Beneath it, somewhere in the undergrowth, the heavy tread of a predator fades away. The glide has saved it, not as flight, but as escape, a silent negotiation with gravity. That is how evolution moves, not in leaps, but in improvisations. The feather, once a tool for warmth, becomes a tool for display, then for movement, then almost without meaning to, for air. Step by step, color by color, life invents flight. Each microraptor carries this transformation in miniature. Its body is a study in balance and design, long feathers stretching from both arms and legs, creating a double pair of wings that flare like petals in motion. The tail, a fan of precision, acts as rudder and ornament. When it perches, the feathers fold close, concealing their brilliance. When it glides, they open like a secret revealed. The creature is both predator and dancer, both shadow and prism. The evolution of color itself is a quiet triumph. To make pigment requires energy, resources, intention. Black and brown come easily, the Earth's first palette. But blues and greens, the metallic sheens that ripple across Microraptor's body, are born from structure, not dye. Microscopic layers within the feather scatter light through interference, bending wavelengths, conjuring color from geometry. It is physics turned into poetry, a natural prism shimmering in the canopy. These colors serve no single purpose. They attract mates. Yes, flashes of brilliance in courtship dances that might last only seconds, but they also confuse predators, break outlines, distort movement. When a Microraptor leaps from one branch to another, its shimmer becomes a blur, a spark, a trick of light that the eye struggles to follow. Survival through beauty, defense through illusion. Around them, the great Dinosaurs still rule the ground, massive jaws, muscles rippling, claws the size of sickles, yet even they are changing, subtly within the same world of adaptation. As the great predators rely on brute force and stealth, the smaller feathered creatures rely on agility, cleverness, and the new possibilities of air. The forest, once echoing with the footfalls of giants, now holds two kinds of life, those that crush the ground and those that learn to leave it. Imagine the daily rhythm of such a world. Fawning mist settles over the treetops, beading on the feathers of sleeping creatures. As the first light filters in, tiny droplets slide off the intricate veins, repelled by the microscopic texture that makes feathers nearly waterproof. The creatures stretch, shake, and preen, grooming each filament back into order. It is not vanity, it is maintenance, survival. A damaged feather means imbalance. A torn vein means drag. The act of preening is as vital as eating. Through care, these small creatures maintain their armor of air and color. When midday comes and the forest hums with heat, they hunt, darting after insects, chasing lizards, always alert. And when the heat fades into the gold of late afternoon, they begin to display. Feathers flare in the slanted light, tails sweep arcs through the air, soft sounds echo through the trees. Communication becomes ritual. The forest becomes a stage. It's easy to forget, watching them, that none of this was planned. Evolution is blind, but its results can look like intention. The shimmer of Microraptor's feathers, the precise overlap of barbs and veins, the glide through open air, these are not choices, but accidents that stayed because they worked and because they were beautiful. Life stumbled upon color, upon structure, upon the way air can lift a body, and decided to keep them. Over generations, these feathers grow more refined. The shafts strengthen, the branching becomes denser, the surface is smoother. Some species favor broad, rounded feathers for display, others evolve narrow, stiff ones for gliding. The forest becomes a living experiment in design. The same element, the feather, adapts to countless needs: warmth, signal, movement. And through it all, color remains. Because in every age, the world responds to beauty. The light of the Cretaceous sun plays across feathers that no eye from our time will ever truly see, and yet the earth remembers them. The gleam of blue-black, the flash of emerald, the soft underlight of bronze. These were the first true colors of life on land. Colors made not by petals or butterflies, but by creatures of bone and claw. If you stood beneath the canopy then, you might catch a rain of feathers drifting down, shed in the heat or plucked in a quiet scuffle. Each one, seen up close, would be astonishing. A structure so fine, so mathematical, that even our most precise machines would struggle to replicate it. Tiny barbs interlocking with invisible hooks, forming a perfect surface that bends but doesn't break. The genius of evolution lies not in strength, but in delicacy. And somewhere in that endless green, a small Microraptor launches itself once more. Its leap is quick, its descent graceful. It spreads all four wings and glides, tail feathers steering, eyes fixed on a branch ahead. The wind hums through its plumage like a whisper of the future. Below, the footsteps of an allosaur fade into distance. The glider is safe. It has learned to trust the air. Not yet flying, not yet free, but close, so close. In those few seconds of glide, the world sees what it has never seen before, an animal suspended between earth and sky, carried not by luck but by design. A design written in colour, in light, in the soft architecture of feathers. And as the creature lands, the sun catches its plumage one last time. For an instant the blues blaze into violet, the blacks into green, and the air around it seems to glow. Then the light shifts, and it disappears again into the trees. Flight is still a dream, but in these forests, that dream already has a body, shining, silent, alive. The earth watches, patient as always. It does not hurry its miracles. One day these feathers will carry descendants farther than any branch, higher than any mountain. But tonight, under the fading light of the Cretaceous sun, they are enough. Each plume, each shimmer, each glide is a promise, a small perfect rehearsal for the sky. Archaeopteryx, the legendary bridge of stone and sky. In the year 1861, deep in the quiet limestone quarries of Solnhofen, Germany, a quarryman split a slab of stone and uncovered something that had been waiting for 150 million years. The rock did not just hold the imprint of an ancient creature. It held a revelation pressed between layers of time. There, in the pale grey dust of the Jurassic, lay the ghost of a being caught between worlds. Archaeopteryx, the creature that would become the most poetic fossil in history. A fossil that seemed to whisper, "I am both." The limestone around Solnhofen had formed in still shallow lagoons, sealed off from tides and scavengers, where every ripple of a fish fin or fall of a feather could be captured and entombed. The air was hot, the seas warm and sluggish, and for millions of years, silt settled quietly in these waters, recording the passing of life as thin, delicate pages. It was on one of those pages that Archaeopteryx was written, a perfect script of transformation. When the fossil emerged, it seemed almost unreal. A creature with the jaws and teeth of a reptile, the claws of a small predator, the long, bony tail of a dinosaur, and yet, over its body spread the unmistakable tracery of feathers. Each vein, each shaft, each fine barb lay pressed in stone like the signature of light itself. It was the first of its kind to show the union of two great dynasties, the lineage of earthbound hunters and the lineage of flight. In that moment, the world's understanding of life cracked open. Just 2 years earlier, Charles Darwin had published On the Origin of Species, and his theory of evolution by natural selection had sent tremors through the scientific world. It was elegant, daring, and deeply controversial. Critics demanded proof, a tangible, undeniable form that bridged the gap between old worlds and new, between reptile and bird, between what was and what could become. And there, as if the earth itself had been listening, Archaeopteryx appeared. It was not simply a fossil, it was a sentence written by evolution in stone. Look at it closely, as the paleontologists did when they brushed away the last grains of dust. Its skull was lined with sharp, conical teeth, teeth fit for catching insects or small prey. Not the beak of a bird, but the jaws of something ancient. Its wings bore 3 fingers, each tipped with a curved claw strong enough to grasp branches or climb. Its tail stretched long and straight, built from vertebrae that ended not in the fan-like structure of modern birds, but in a tapering whip of bone. And yet, down its arms and along its tail flowed the unmistakable impression of feathers, real feathers, arranged in perfect symmetry, layered for lift. It looked like a dream caught in transition, as though evolution had paused halfway between 2 destinies and allowed itself to be photographed. Scientists of the time struggled to describe it. Was it a bird, a reptile, something else entirely? The name they gave it, Archaeopteryx lithographica, means ancient wing printed in stone, and even that seemed too modest. To many, it was proof incarnate, a fossilized bridge connecting dinosaurs to birds, validating the fragile, radical beauty of Darwin's idea. Darwin himself, upon hearing of it, felt a quiet satisfaction. He had once written that if intermediate forms existed, they might be found in the record of the rocks, hidden in the earth's long memory. Now here was one, delicate as a whisper, yet powerful enough to silence the doubters. The creature's existence was an answer from deep time, one that said, transformation is real. The past lives within the present. But what kind of life did Archaeopteryx truly lead? Picture it in motion, not as a fossil but as flesh. The forests of late Jurassic Europe were dense and humid, filled with ferns, cycads, and the first true conifers. In this world, Archaeopteryx was small, about the size of a raven, light but sinewy, its bones hollow yet strong. His body was covered in feathers that shimmered darkly, perhaps black with iridescent hues like oil on water. The air was thick with the calls of insects and the rustle of early mammals in the leaf litter. Archaeopteryx perched among the low branches of trees, its clawed fingers gripping bark, its eyes sharp with predatory intent. It could run, leap, and climb, its long tail acting as a counterbalance. When startled, it would spread its feathered limbs, the air catching beneath them, allowing it to glide or flutter down in a controlled fall. It was not yet the master of flight, but it was learning. Nature was experimenting, shaping bone and feather into something that could eventually conquer the air. Each feather on its wing was a triumph of engineering. The primary feathers formed narrow veins for lift, while the secondaries curved gently to stabilize. The tail feathers spread wide like a fan to steer and brake. When the wind moved through them, it found structure, precision, design. These were not random ornaments. They were the instruments of motion tuned by time, and yet the creature was imperfect, incomplete. Its sternum lacked the deep keel that modern birds use for powerful wing beats. Its shoulder joint was angled for climbing more than flapping. Its chest muscles were small. True flight, as we know it, was still a future invention. Archaeopteryx was not a soaring bird. It was a leaper, a glider, a creature testing the edge of air. Still, imagine the sight. A small, dark shape leaping from a tree, feathers flashing, arms outstretched, tail streaming behind like a ribbon of shadow. Below, a young allosaur prowls, its massive body half hidden by ferns, a snap of twigs, a hiss of breath, and the little creature lifts, just enough to clear the predator's reach, just enough to survive. The forest holds its breath, then silence, save for the flutter of leaves settling where danger once moved. In that single motion, a glide, a heartbeat, a defiance, lies the entire story of life's persistence. Archaeopteryx was never a conqueror of the skies, but it was the first to try. In its bones lies the blueprint of courage itself, the moment when the Earth's creatures began to reach, not just for food or shelter, but for the air, for movement beyond the ground. Evolution had found a new axis, and it would never let go. To hold an Archaeopteryx fossil today is to hold paradox itself. In the same slab of stone, one can trace claws that once tore through bark and feathers that once bent wind. Its spine and hips mirror those of its dinosaur cousins, while its wings anticipate the future. Every ridge of bone tells the story of descent with modification, the slow, ceaseless conversation between form and function. Its discovery also changed how we see time. Before it, many thought of the past as separate, sealed off, divided into distinct ages, but Archaeopteryx blurred the boundaries. It showed that nature doesn't leap, it flows, reptile into bird, scale into feather, ground into sky. The fossil was not just a missing link, it was a map of continuity. When it was first displayed, people gathered to gaze at it, some in wonder, some in disbelief. The feathers, etched so delicately that they seemed almost alive, shimmered faintly under lamplight. Here was a creature that seemed to belong to two realities at once, a riddle written in biology and stone. It was a mirror to humanity's own curiosity, half grounded, half reaching for flight. Over the years, more specimens would be found, each adding new detail to the story: the curve of a wing, the shape of a claw, the pattern of feathers along the tail. Each discovery confirmed the same truth, that birds are not separate from dinosaurs, but their living continuation. Every robin, every sparrow, every eagle carries within its bones the echo of Archaeopteryx. When a bird lifts from the ground, when its wings cut through air, it completes a sentence that began with that fossil. Think of that when you watch a bird take flight. It is performing a gesture 150 million years old. The limestone that held Archaeopteryx is smooth, almost delicate, To the touch, it feels like parchment hardened by time. On its surface, the outline of the creature still rests. Wings outspread, tail fanned, skull turned slightly as if caught mid-motion. It looks almost serene, as though it knew that its moment, suspended between life and stone, would become immortal. Scientists often speak of transitional fossils as data points, as evidence, but Archaeopteryx is something more. It is a poem written by the planet about itself. It is the record of transformation made visible, the exact moment when nature discovered how to turn body into wind. Perhaps that is why it still feels alive. Even after all these years, even under glass and light, there is something about it that vibrates faintly, like a note that has not finished ringing. You can almost imagine the rustle of its feathers, the quick tilt of its head, the leap into silence. Archaeopteryx stands as a symbol not of perfection, but of transition. It reminds us that evolution is not a ladder to climb, but a river to follow, winding, patient, full of detours and beauty. Its claws still curve toward the past, its wings still reach toward the future. Between them lies the entire arc of life's imagination. When Darwin learned of it, he must have smiled that quiet, knowing smile of his, a man who had guessed what the Earth already knew. The fossil did not prove him right in a single stroke, but it gave his theory wings, both literally and metaphorically. It showed that the story of life was not written in separate chapters, but in flowing verses, one leading into the next. And so, Archaeopteryx remains, even now, more than a relic. It is a messenger. It whispers to every generation of scientist, every dreamer who studies the bones of time. Look closer. The past still breathes. It reminds us that transformation is not abrupt, but endless, that beauty is not separate from struggle, and that flight, real flight, was not a gift granted all at once, but a slow, graceful negotiation between gravity and hope. If you ever find yourself standing in a museum before its fossil, take a quiet moment. Let your eyes follow the outline of its wings, the curve of its teeth, the tail that once balanced every glide. Listen to what the earth is saying through it. It will not shout. It will whisper, as it did to Darwin, as it does to all who care to hear. Everything changes, everything continues, and even in stone, the dream of flight endures. The Chinese fossils, the painted dinosaurs of light and time. In the northeastern reaches of China, where winter breathes through pines and mist drifts over low mountains, lies a landscape unlike any other on Earth. A land that remembers in color the rocks of Liaoning province, layered in quiet volcanic ash, have become a library of ancient life, each slab a page pressed from a lost world. Here in stone so fine it captures the shadow of a feather or the curve of an eyelid, the past preserved its brightest secret, dinosaurs not grey and scaly as once imagined, but clothed in feathers as vivid as fire and dusk. For millions of years these creatures lay sleeping beneath the earth, their delicate forms hidden in ash from ancient eruptions that sealed entire ecosystems in an instant. When scientists first split these rocks open in the 1990s, what they found changed the story of evolution forever. Fossils from these Chinese beds, Sinosauropteryx, Microraptor, Caudipteryx, and many more, showed that the age of dinosaurs was not a world of dull hides and shadows, but a symphony of pattern and hue. Feathers did not begin as mere whispers of warmth. They blossomed into canvases of survival, communication, and beauty. Imagine the ancient landscape they once moved through. Forests of ginkgo and dawn redwood, ferns unfurling beside volcanic lakes, the air alive with dragonflies as wide as your hand. Among the branches and reeds, the feathered dinosaurs glimmered like living jewels, each movement catching the light, each color shaped by the quiet calculations of evolution. When we speak of the feathered dinosaurs of China, we are really speaking of the earth discovering its own palette. The first among them, Sinosauropteryx, was small, no larger than a modern cat. Its body was wrapped in a halo of fine, hair-like filaments that once puzzled scientists but soon proved unmistakably feathered. What startled everyone even more was that these filaments carried pigment. Under the microscope, paleontologists found microscopic structures called melanosomes, tiny packets of color still locked within the fossilized feathers. Their shapes told a story, some long and rod-like, some round and dense. each type corresponding to a particular shade. From this, the colors of the past came back to life, and the world gasped when they learned what Sinosauropteryx had once looked like. Its body shimmered in rusty orange and white bands, its tail ringed with stripes like a brushstroke of flame. It was the first dinosaur whose true color was known, the first time the stone had whispered not only what it was but how it shone. Picture it stalking through the ferns, tail lifted high, its bright body glowing through the misty undergrowth. Those stripes were more than decoration, they were strategy. They blurred its outline, concealed its motion, and perhaps in the low light of dawn, flashed just enough to signal another of its kind. Higher in the trees lived another marvel, the four-winged Microraptor, one of nature's most exquisite experiments. Its body was sleek, its limbs adorned with long, glossy feathers, two pairs of wings, front and back, spreading like a black blossom as it leapt from branch to branch. These feathers were not dull or flat, but dark as obsidian, shimmering with blue and violet iridescence. When sunlight touched them, they lit up like oil on water, a secret sky trapped in the plumage of a forest hunter. Microraptor's world was not a safe one. Below, massive tyrannosaurs stalked through the shadows, their heavy steps cracking branches, their breath steaming in the cool morning air. For a creature the size of a crow, survival depended on silence, on cleverness, on flight, without flying. Microraptor learned the art of the glide. Its feathered limbs caught the air like soft blades, turning a fall into a drift into an escape. It leapt from branch to branch, from shadow to shadow, slipping through leaves in flickers of dark blue light. From the ground it must have looked like a phantom, a blur that vanished as quickly as it appeared. The fossils of Microraptor tell that story in every feather. Each impression in the rock preserves a perfect outline of structure and symmetry, primary feathers along its arms, secondaries trailing its legs, and a fan of tail feathers forming an elegant rudder. Even its smallest filaments are frozen in place, as if caught mid-flight. The stone remembers the way it moved, the arc of its fall, the shape of its freedom. And yet, even in its grace, Microraptor was a predator. Its sharp teeth and curved claws reveal a hunter's life, chasing insects, lizards, perhaps even small mammals. Its wings were not for power, but precision, not yet for the sky, but for the space between trees. In those fleeting glides, the history of flight itself was rehearsing, line by line. Not far from Microraptor's domain, another creature thrived in the open clearings near lake shores. Caudipteryx, the tail feather. It was larger, rounder, and more confident, a curious mix of dinosaur and bird. Its body was covered in short feathers, but from its arms and tail extended elegant plumes, broad, symmetrical, gleaming in shades that may have ranged from soft cream to black and gold. Unlike Microraptor, Caudipteryx could not glide. Its wings were decorative, expressive, tools of display and signal. When you picture it, think not of a hunter but of a performer. It strutted through the shallows, tail feathers fanning in deliberate rhythm, perhaps to attract mates or assert territory. Each movement sent ripples through the air and the water, a choreography of instinct and light. Its beak, small, toothless at the front, but lined with teeth at the back, hinted at an omnivorous diet, pecking seeds one moment and insects the next. In its posture, in the way its feathers spread like a fan, you can glimpse the ancestors of cranes, pheasants and peacocks, those future heirs of plumage and pride. The fossils from Liaoning speak softly, but they speak in color. Some show hints of orange, others deep blues or muted grays. One slab holds a scatter of fine feathers that still shine faintly under certain light, as if the memory of their owner refuses to fade. Each specimen is a painting of time, revealing that feathers came in as many forms and purposes as imagination itself, for warmth, for flight, for camouflage, for love. To touch these stones is to hold a mirror to the deep past. The details are almost miraculous. The faint curve of a wing, the delicate tracing of barbs along a feather shaft, the ghost of pigment locked in mineral veins. The earth preserved them with tenderness, wrapping them in ash and silence until we were ready to listen. What these Chinese fossils showed the world was that feathers were not rare ornaments, not the sudden innovation of one lineage, but a widespread inheritance, a design tested across species, perfected through patience. Dinosaurs did not merely evolve into birds, they were birds in spirit, long before the sky accepted them. In the flicker of Sinosauropteryx's tail, in the shimmer of Microraptor's wings, in the proud display of Caudipteryx's plumes, we see the unfolding of a great story, the Earth learning how to paint movement, how to sculpt air, how to turn survival into beauty. If you could stand in that ancient forest now, you would see it, the rust-orange glint of Sinosauropteryx darting between ferns, the soft swoop of Microraptor gliding overhead, its feathers flashing blue and black, the stately dance of Caudipteryx fanning its tail by the lake shore, and somewhere beyond, the deep rumble of a tyrannosaur rolling through the trees. The air would be alive with color and motion, danger and grace. Each of these creatures is a stanza in the same poem, the poem of flight before flight, of feathers before wings. Their colors are not mere decoration, they are the language of survival. Red to warn, black to vanish, blue to dazzle. In every hue lies intention. When scientists first revealed these fossils to the world, the reaction was awe mixed with disbelief. The old image of dinosaurs, grey, reptilian, cold, crumbled overnight. Here were creatures radiant with plumage, not monsters but masterpieces. They transformed textbooks and imaginations alike. Museums filled with reconstructions that gleamed like living constellations. And suddenly every bird that fluttered outside a window seemed to carry an echo of something ancient, because these fossils did not just prove that dinosaurs had feathers. They proved that color itself is ancient, that beauty, expression, and individuality have existed for hundreds of millions of years. Evolution, it turns out, has always loved to decorate its survivors. Even the ash that buried these creatures was part of the story. Volcanic eruptions swept through their habitats, flash-preserving life in exquisite detail. In those moments of catastrophe, time folded. Each falling feather became a note in the long song of creation, frozen before it could fade. The earth, through disaster, became an artist. Today, the slabs of Liaoning rest in museums, their surfaces smooth and pale, but under the right light they still glimmer faintly. If you look closely, you can see the delicate outlines where feathers once spread, their symmetry impeccable, their colors hinted at by the ghosts of pigment. And if you let your imagination breathe for just a moment, you might see them move again, the shimmer of red, the pulse of blue, the flick of a tail. Sinosauropteryx, Microraptor, Caudipteryx. The names sound scientific, but they are really verses, each one telling a different tone of the same story. Together they reveal a truth that feels almost spiritual, that the boundary between earth and sky was never a wall, only a line waiting to be crossed. The tyrannosaurs still ruled the ground in those days, but evolution was already sketching escape routes in feather and form. The future would belong not to the biggest or the strongest, but to the lightest, to those who learned that survival could also mean grace. So when you see a modern bird, its feathers catching sunlight, its wings folding like poetry, remember that it is part of that same inheritance. The shimmer of a hummingbird, the blaze of a pheasant's tail, the glossy blue of a crow's wing, all of it was written first in the ash of China's ancient forests. Those colors are not new. They are echoes of a world long gone, revived in every flutter of life today. Perhaps that is what makes these fossils so moving. They are not silent bones, but living bridges between worlds, proof that beauty and function have always walked hand in hand. The earth did not simply create life, it composed it, feather by feather, until the air itself became a stage. And in that stage, long before the first true birds took flight, the painted dinosaurs of Liaoning rehearsed the oldest performance of all, the art of being seen, of gliding through danger, of surviving through color. Listen closely and you can almost hear them still. The whisper of wings through prehistoric leaves, the rustle of tails striped in red and white, the gentle murmur of the earth saying, "Glide now, little one. You were made for the light." Evolutionary pressure, the climbers, the gliders, and the great experiments. The forest of the early Cretaceous was a labyrinth of shadows and branches, a living maze that whispered with danger. Beneath its canopy, predators moved like ghosts, massive tyrannosaurs in the distance, smaller hunters slinking closer to the ground, For the tiny theropods that lived among the ferns and roots, every sound was a question of survival. The world around them was vast, full of teeth and hunger, and the ground, once the only home they had ever known, was no longer safe. It began with small choices, as evolution always does. A heartbeat of hesitation before stepping into the open. A flicker of thought, if such things could be called thought, toward the trees. Safety waited upward beyond the claws and jaws, among the branches that moved with wind but not with predators. The smallest theropods began to climb. At first, their claws found awkward purchase on the rough bark. They were ground-born hunters learning the feel of height, talons scraping against resinous trunks, tails swinging for balance. But generation by generation, bodies began to shift. The legs grew lighter, the tails stiffened into counterweights. The arms, once the tools of grasping and seizing, became tools of balance, then of lift. Evolution's quiet hand was at work, shaping, adjusting not in one creature or one lifetime, but across millions of dawns and dusks. The forests were not silent during this transformation. They echoed with the rustle of leaves and the soft thuds of leaps gone wrong. A young climber might scramble up a trunk, clutching with curved claws, only to lose its footing and tumble through the air. The fall was brief but full of revelation. A body built for running was learning something new, that air too could be touched, that falling could be slowed, shaped, almost controlled, and so began one of evolution's most daring experiments, the journey from ground to sky. The pressure of survival turned every mistake into opportunity. To leap from a branch and land safely became a matter of refinement. Longer arms spread wider, lighter bones cushioned the descent, and soft down thickened along the limbs, catching air like a breath held between feathers. With each generation, these adaptations became more pronounced. The forest was full of climbers, gliders, and dreamers, species that did not yet fly, but were learning to. Among these dreamers were the small four-winged forms, creatures that carried feathers on both forelimbs and hind limbs. They leapt from branch to branch, spreading their limbs wide in a crude, elegant mimicry of flight. Their bodies were laboratories of motion evolution, testing ideas, seeing what worked, discarding what did not. Their extra feathers stretched between limbs like sails, glimmering in sunlight before vanishing into shade. Some succeeded in gliding short distances, others floundered, falling in the underbrush and learning the hard way. The forest floor must have been littered with the evidence of these attempts, the price of innovation written in broken branches and breathless pauses. There were others too, more daring still, whose wings were not made of feathers at all, but of membranes stretched taut between elongated fingers. Creatures like Yi, strange and beautiful, bore thin, flexible skin that formed parachutes of living tissue. When they leapt, their wings caught the air like the sails of small ships. For a moment, they drifted, slowed, controlled, not flying but gliding, balancing between gravity and grace. To us, they might look like patchwork creatures, half reptile, half bird, half bat. A design not yet finished but alive with potential. And yet, these experiments rarely lasted long. The forest was ruthless. The air, though gentle to the imagination, was unforgiving to the body. Many designs failed. Some could glide but not steer. Some could leap but not slow the fall. Some found that wings made running harder, climbing clumsier. Nature tried them all, adjusting and refining across ages, as if whispering, not yet, but closer. The pressures that shaped them were constant. Predators, competition, the hunger for safety, the search for food, the call of mates echoing through the canopy. Each force pulled at the fabric of their form, stretching possibilities. Those who could climb higher avoided jaws below. Those who could glide farther found new territories, new food, new chances. Evolution rewarded not perfection, but persistence. Every leap was a negotiation with fate. Every glide was an act of defiance against gravity itself. The forest, seen from above, must have been alive with these movements. Small bodies flashing through leaves, a rain of gliders crossing gaps between trees. Some creatures may have used their feathered limbs to steer as they fell, twisting midair to land upright. Others leapt to startle prey or to impress rivals, spreading plumage in a fluttering display of dominance. What had begun as a desperate scramble for safety became, over millennia, a performance of life's imagination. And in this performance, colour played its part too. The plumage of these early gliders likely shimmered in blues, blacks, or golds, their brightness signalling strength, vitality, or warning. When a predator approached, a flash of dark feathers might confuse or conceal. When a mate appeared, the same feathers might gleam like a promise. Every shade was an experiment, a brushstroke in the evolutionary painting. Consider the forest through their eyes, the sunlight fractured by leaves, the air alive with drifting seeds and insects, the hum of life rising in layers. To leap into that space was to enter another world, a world of momentum and silence, where falling became flight for just a moment. They might have felt the wind as we feel inspiration, sudden, invisible, irresistible. Some would spread their limbs wide, gliding between branches in long arcs. Others would flap instinctively, adding tiny bursts of motion that slowed their descent. Each generation, the reflex deepened, the muscles strengthened, and the wings became less ornaments and more tools. These were not great, conscious leaps toward flight. Evolution does not dream. It stumbles forward, guided by what works, what survives. But if it had a language, it would have spoken through these forests in sighs and whispers. Try again. Try differently. And so they did. The small theropods that once crept among roots became creatures of air's edge. They learned to use momentum as armor, timing their leaps to match the breath of wind. Their tails stiffened for balance. Their claws curved for climbing. Their feathers lengthened and layered for drag and lift. Some species developed small flaps of skin between the limbs and body, expanding their surface area. Some grew longer arm feathers that curved like sails. Others refined their muscles for better control. Every change was subtle, but every change mattered. Imagine one of them now, a small, lithe creature crouched on a branch, golden light spilling through the canopy. It tilts its head, watching for movement below. A larger predator prowls the forest floor, scales catching light like wet stone. The small creature shifts its weight, feels the bark beneath its claws, and leaps. Its limbs spread, feathers fanning wide, tail feathers flaring behind, like a rudder. For a heartbeat it hangs, suspended. Then the air catches it, slows it glides across the space between trees and lands, heart racing, alive. In that single act, repeated 1,000 times across generations, the story of flight takes shape. These experiments, though imperfect, built the foundation for everything that would follow. The four-winged gliders proved that multiple surfaces could control descent, guiding evolution toward balance and aerodynamics. The membrane-winged creatures showed the possibilities of skin and bone, stretched to shape air. Some species combined both, their limbs bearing both feathers and thin layers of skin. As if nature couldn't decide which path to choose. It didn't have to. It was exploring, improvising, writing the first draft of flight. The failures were as important as the successes. Those who fell and broke taught evolution what not to repeat. Those who glided farther taught it what to preserve. Over time, the forest itself became a vast workshop, a place where every leap was a test, every gust of wind a teacher. When we look back now through the lens of science and imagination, we can see these creatures not as oddities, but as pioneers. They were not yet birds, not yet masters of the air, but they carried the spark of what was to come. Their wings, whether feathered or membranous, were sketches in motion, ideas given body. Each generation refined the physics of possibility. Even the failures had grace. Year's membranous sails may have torn easily, or sagged in wet weather, limiting its reach. The four-winged gliders may have struggled to coordinate their limbs, flapping one pair while steering the other. But every imperfection carried within it a seed of the future. Nature rarely deletes its experiments. It builds upon them. What began as gliding became the prelude to soaring. What began as survival became freedom. It's humbling to think of how many lives, how many silent centuries, were spent perfecting the simple act of falling well. For hundreds of thousands of years, these creatures leapt without truly flying, chasing safety and discovery in equal measure. Their small hearts beat the rhythm of persistence, not knowing that they were rewriting the physics of life. Sometimes the imagination of Earth feels almost human in its curiosity. It tries, fails, adjusts. It builds prototypes in flesh and bone. It lets creatures fall, then teaches them how not to. And though none of these early climbers ever truly conquered the sky, they paved the path for those who would. The forest must have been full of small miracles, leaps caught by wind, feathers glinting in the sun, the hush of landing on another branch. From a distance, it would have looked like the world learning to breathe up. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear it still, the creak of branches, the sigh of air around tiny wings, the earth whispering softly to its creatures. Go on, try again, you're almost there. These gliders, these accidental acrobats, carried evolution's curiosity in their bodies. They didn't know it, but every attempt brought life closer to something astonishing. Not the heavy, fearful leaps of escape, but the effortless lift of flight. And though they fell more often than they flew, each fall was a lesson, each glide a prayer to the open air. Perhaps that's how every great transformation begins, not with certainty but with courage, not with success, but with the willingness to leap. True flight, a body reimagined by the sky. The dawn comes differently when the air belongs to you. Somewhere in the ancient skies of the Cretaceous, a new kind of creature opens its wings, not to glide, not to fall, but to fly. The forest below is still, the air trembling with the first pulse of true flight. It is a moment that rewrote the planet. For millions of years, the Earth had watched creatures climb, leap and drift, each testing the limits of gravity. But this was something else entirely. To fly not by chance, but by power, to beat the air itself into submission, demanded more than feathers. It demanded transformation, body and soul. The sky does not forgive inefficiency. To rise, an animal must bargain with weight, resistance and air. The first true flyers were not simply gliders with longer feathers. They were living engines, their bodies rebuilt from the inside out. Their bones, once heavy with the legacy of the ground, had become hollow and light, each one a delicate miracle of architecture. Thin walls supported by struts and crossbeams of calcium, strong as steel but light as breath. Through those bones, air itself would flow, cooling and fueling the motion of flight. Their lungs had changed too. Ordinary lungs breathe in and out. Air enters, fills and leaves again. But in these new sky dwellers, breath became a continuous river. Air flowed in one direction through a complex network of air sacs, hollow chambers that filled the chest and even the spaces between bones. When they inhaled, fresh air rushed, not just into lungs, but into rear air sacs. When they exhaled, that air passed forward through the lungs again, ensuring that oxygen never stopped moving. Every wing beat was matched by a heartbeat, every exhale by an inhale that never truly ended. In this design, the sky found its perfect lungs, constant, rhythmic, tireless. And then at the core of it all, there was muscle. The breastbone of these new flyers, once flat and simple, grew a deep ridge. The keel, upon that keel anchored the pectoralis, the great chest muscle, and above it, a smaller one, the supracoracoideus, arranged like a system of pulleys. Together they powered the wings, one to pull them down, the other to lift them up. In every beat of those wings was stored the history of countless failures that came before. Now at last, the air obeyed. The wings no longer caught wind. They created it. When these ancient birds took off, it was no longer a fall softened by feathers. It was an explosion of force. They crouched, pushed from the ground, and the air answered. The downstroke carved through wind with precision. The upstroke twisted and flexed to prepare for the next. Muscles sang, bones flexed, feathers bent but did not break. For the first time, life had found a way to stay aloft through will alone. True flight required mastery of every element. Balance, power, and endurance. Even the shape of the body shifted to serve the air. The tail shortened, its heavy bones fusing into a lightweight fan of feathers called the pygostyle, a steering rudder for mid-air control. The arms lengthened into wings, their digits fused to form a solid frame for feathers. The skull lightened, jaws replaced by a toothless beak, efficient and aerodynamic. Every feature was a negotiation with gravity, a perfection refined by trial and wind. The world must have looked entirely different from up there. From above, the forests stretched like seas of green, rivers coiled like silver threads, and shadows of giants, still bound to the earth, moved slowly below. The air shimmered with sunlight, carrying scents and sounds no ground dweller could ever know. It was freedom, but also responsibility, for flight demanded constant motion, constant precision. A single error, a feather misplaced, a wing misjudged, and the sky could turn from ally to executioner. Yet life had done it. The earth had imagined creatures that could live in the air, not just move through it. These early birds hunted insects in mid-flight, dived toward rivers, or soared in long curving arcs above the treetop. Some, with sharp talons and keen eyes, learned to use height as advantage, stooping from above like living arrows. Others discovered endurance, crossing great stretches of land and sea, carried by invisible rivers of wind. The secret to this new power lay in precision. Each feather was a masterpiece of engineering, flexible yet strong, capable of changing shape mid-beat. The vanes could twist to catch air on the downstroke, and then slice cleanly through it on the upstroke. Tiny muscles at the base of each feather adjusted angles by fractions of a degree. Every wing beat was a calculation of lift, drag, and thrust, a living equation solved hundreds of times a second. Flight was no longer an accident of falling, it was a symphony of physics. To sustain it, their metabolism soared. These new flyers burned energy at a ferocious rate, their hearts pounding faster than any land creatures, their blood rich with oxygen. Food became fuel, every morsel converted into motion. They ate constantly, small insects, seeds, fruit, or prey, to feed the furnace within. Heat was no longer an enemy, but a necessity. They became endothermic, warm-blooded engines of the sky, and so their world expanded. The forest was no longer a boundary, but a beginning. They could chase sunlight from one horizon to another, follow rivers, escape drought or cold. Flight gave them migration, that beautiful pact between distance and time. When seasons shifted, they rose and followed warmth across continents, crossing seas and storms, guided by instinct and the geometry of stars. Think of what that must have felt like. The first morning a creature left the safety of branches and kept rising, not gliding, not falling, but truly ascending. The earth itself would have fallen away beneath its gaze. The air would have thinned, the horizon widened, the heart beating faster than ever before, and somewhere deep in its mindless memory, the whisper of evolution would have murmured, "You've done it. You've become the wind." The transformation was so complete that even their inner worlds changed. Their vision sharpened, tuned to movement, to distance, to the subtle play of light and shadow. Their bones fused in patterns that made their skeletons both lighter and stronger. Their sense of balance, controlled by an inner ear refined for acrobatics, allowed them to twist and dive in perfect precision. What had once been survival on land became artistry in air. Predation also evolved. From above they became hunters, raining down from the sky with precision impossible to predict. They could strike from angles no ground predator could anticipate. The ancient world trembled as the hierarchy of life shifted. Those who once hid in trees now ruled from them. But flight was not only for conquest, it was also for connection. The sky offered not just escape, but companionship. Mates displayed their feathers in complex dances mid-air, flashing colors in spirals of courtship. Flocks gathered and moved as one. A collective intelligence carried by wind. The sound of beating wings became a new rhythm in Earth song. Everywhere flight went, it reshaped life. New plants evolved lighter seeds, carried by birds over oceans. Insects adapted, developing faster wings to evade aerial predators. The air became a stage for countless small dramas, the chase, the dance, the migration, the moment of pause before a dive. In learning to fly, birds remade the planet's ecology itself, and still flight demanded compromise. Lightness meant fragility. A broken feather or injured muscle could mean death. Balance was everything. Yet in that balance, evolution found poetry, a kind of trust between creature and air. Each wing beat was both an act of faith and a fact of physics. If you could slow time and watch an ancient bird in motion, you would see the dance of precision. The downstroke carves the air, the feathers flexing like living sails. The upstroke folds, smooth, efficient, slicing upward for the next beat. The breast muscles surge, contracting and releasing with astonishing rhythm. The bones vibrate slightly with every impact of air, spreading force through the skeleton like a symphony of tension. Even the feathers hum faintly, whispering to the wind. No engineer could design such elegance by calculation alone. It was the work of patience, the Earth's longest experiment perfected over eons. Each detail served a purpose. The hollow bones reducing weight but preserving strength, the air sacs cooling the heart during exertion, the rigid torso keeping balance stable, the powerful wings generating both lift and direction. Together, they turned the body into a living equation of aerodynamics. And yet, despite all this precision, there was still mystery. Flight wasn't just motion, it was experience. For the first time in Earth's history, creatures could move not along the surface but through the air, free of boundary. They could see the curve of mountains, the shape of rivers, the glow of dawn from above the mist. The world grew larger, but also more intimate, stitched together by wings. The early skies must have shimmered with these pioneers, small shapes darting and circling, learning the invisible grammar of wind. Some soared for hours, riding thermals that rose from the warming ground. Others beat their wings in bursts of furious energy, chasing insects in tight spirals. The air itself became alive with movement, a realm claimed and filled by heartbeat and feather. The first true flyers were no longer passengers of air. They were partners with it. They understood in the wordless way of instinct that every gust could be read, every current followed. They did not conquer the sky, they joined it. As millions of years passed, flight diversified. Some species grew large, wings stretching meters across, soaring for miles on a single beat. Others grew tiny, flitting between flowers in a blur of motion. Each carried within them the same gift, the same anatomy of air. The hollow bones, the endless lungs, the living engine of the chest, all shared among descendants who would one day become the birds we know. And though the earth below changed, continents drifting, seas rising, forests burning and regrowing, the sky remained. It waited, always, for the next generation to rise into it. When you see a bird today, a swift cutting through twilight, a heron gliding low over a river, a hawk circling the clouds, you are watching that ancient miracle made modern. You are seeing the body reimagined for flight, the dream of those first climbers and gliders finally fulfilled. Every wing beat is history repeating itself, written not in stone but in air. If the earth could speak, perhaps it would whisper to its winged children what it once murmured to their ancestors. You've learned the last element. The ground was your cradle, but the sky, this is your home. And as that bird vanishes into the light, its shadow dissolving into blue, you can almost feel it, the triumph of muscle and motion, the soft echo of 100 million years of trying, the hush of gravity surrendering at last. That is true flight, not just lift and thrust, but transformation. The moment the earth learned how to let go, the cost of flight, risks and rewards in the open sky. Flight, for all its grace, is never free. Every beat of a wing is a bargain with energy, every mile of migration a test of endurance. To look at a bird suspended effortlessly in the air is to see only the poetry, not the price. But behind every glide, every soft feathered breath, lies an economy of survival, one measured not in money but in calories, fatigue and risk. The act of flight changed everything about life on Earth. It redrew the map of possibility, allowing creatures to move between continents, to follow the turning of the seasons, to find food where others could not. But to sustain that miracle required a body perpetually on the edge of hunger. The sky offered freedom, yes, but it demanded everything in return. Consider what it means to take to the air. Muscles contract and release thousands of times a minute, pulling against bones and feathers with perfect synchronization. The heart, a relentless engine, pumps blood at a rate that would exhaust most mammals. The lungs, intricate and efficient, trade oxygen like a marketplace in constant motion. For a bird in flight, Energy burns faster than any fire. Every kilometer of migration across deserts, oceans, or mountain ranges costs a bird its stored reserves of fat and fuel. The larger the journey, the greater the gamble. Many die along the way, starved, blown off course by storms, or simply exhausted by the endless beating of wings. Yet they continue, year after year, because the alternative to stay and starve when winter comes is worse. Flight demands not only power, but precision. Feathers must be immaculate, oiled and preened, each vein aligned to perfection. A single damaged feather can mean drag. Drag means wasted energy. Wasted energy means death. Preening is not vanity. It is survival. You can see it in the meticulous care of a sparrow grooming after rain, or a hawk spreading its wings to dry in the sun. In the sky's economy, maintenance is as vital as movement. Then there is the question of danger. The air, though vast and open, is not without predators. A bird flying low can be snatched by a hawk or falcon. One that flies too high risks exhaustion or disorientation. For some species, taking flight means exposing themselves to watchful eyes below. The very act that saves them from one threat can lead them straight into another. Ground predators, too, have learned the art of timing. Waiting for the moment when a bird must land. Heavy from migration, its muscles trembling with fatigue, even the most graceful flyers must eventually touch the earth, where claws and jaws await. The freedom of flight carries the constant shadow of return. And then there is reproduction, the quiet cost of legacy. For a bird, raising young while maintaining the energy required to fly is one of nature's most demanding equations. Eggs must be incubated, sometimes high on cliffs or in fragile nests balanced against the wind. Parents must hunt, carry food in their beaks or talons, and feed their chicks again and again. Each trip drains reserves. Each gust of air risks loss. Some birds fly hundreds of kilometers a day to find enough food for their young. In them, love and endurance are indistinguishable. Yet, despite all these costs, flight persists. The very fact that it endures is proof of its advantage. For every calorie burned, there is a reward greater than hunger. In the air, birds found what no ground creature could: freedom of distance, mastery of escape, and access to abundance. Where others were bound by terrain, birds found pathways invisible but real. Wind corridors that carried them to new feeding grounds, new climates, new safety. While land animals competed for limited territory, birds could simply rise and go. When drought struck, they left. When food dwindled, they followed its scent across oceans. The sky, once a barrier, became a bridge. To fly is to belong to no single place, but to many. It is to live in constant motion, forever chasing warmth, light, and sustenance. Some species travel thousands of miles each year, tiny bodies crossing hemispheres, guided by instincts written in their bones. The Arctic tern, slender and white, travels from the North Pole to the South and back again each year, touching both ends of the planet in a single lifetime. It is one of evolution's most extravagant gestures, a creature made to follow the sun. But even the smallest birds, those that never migrate, live in this delicate balance between cost and reward. The hummingbird, for example, spends its days suspended between wing beats. Its heart races at more than 1,000 beats per minute, its metabolism a furnace of motion. To survive, it must feed constantly, hundreds of times a day, drinking nectar until it is nearly weightless with sugar. At night it falls into a trance-like torpor, its body cooling, its heart slowing, conserving every drop of energy until dawn. Each sunrise is both a beginning and a reprieve. Energy is currency, and in the economy of flight, the margins are thin. Every feather, every gram of fat, every shift of wind can tip the scales between survival and loss. But those who mastered it were rewarded beyond measure. They could see farther, travel faster, escape more surely than any creature before them. On the ground, life moves in predictable patterns, bound by riverbanks, mountains, and forests. But in the sky there are no borders. The first true flyers changed not only their bodies, but the structure of life itself. They became pollinators, seed carriers, Messengers of ecosystems, plants evolved in answer to their journeys, spreading their offspring across continents through feathers and droppings. Predators adapted to hunt them, prey evolved to evade them. Flight became a thread woven through every level of the food chain. Yet not every lineage chose that path. In the same great family tree that produced the birds, another branch turned downward, the crocodilians, those ancient relatives who stayed with the water and the earth. They chose stillness over motion, patience over distance. Their armor thickened where birds' bones hollowed. Their muscles turned to power rather than endurance. While birds traded security for freedom, crocodiles traded freedom for certainty. Each path was perfect for the world it occupied. Where the bird burns energy like a comet, the crocodile conserves it like stone. It can wait for hours, days, even weeks, without eating, its body slow, its hunger precise. It cannot chase the horizon, but it can endure. The bird must always move or starve. The crocodile can rest and outlast time. Both are successes. Both are answers to the same question: how best to live in a world that never stops changing. To fly is to risk everything, for the chance to see farther. To remain is to endure everything for the promise of survival. The sky and the swamp are two sides of the same coin, and yet, when one watches a bird in motion, a swallow twisting through the air, a hawk riding invisible thermals, it is hard not to feel that the risk was worth it. The cost of flight, immense as it is, gave life new dimensions. It gave the planet movement, migration, and melody. The beating of wings became the heartbeat of ecosystems, the rhythm of seasons. From an evolutionary perspective, flight is extravagance incarnate. It is wasteful, dangerous, and endlessly demanding. But it also creates abundance. Birds spread seeds, pollinate flowers, and keep insect populations in check. Their migrations stir entire food webs into motion. Each journey, though costly, sustains 1,000 others. The energy they expend returns to the earth in renewal. Flight teaches a lesson about the mathematics of life. Sometimes to survive, one must spend more than seems possible. The price of movement is high, but stagnation costs more. For in motion lies adaptation, and in adaptation resilience. The world of birds reminds us that energy and freedom are entwined. To move swiftly, one must live lightly. To live lightly, one must let go of the unnecessary bones, teeth, even weight itself. Evolution stripped the body down until nothing remained that could not serve the air, and in doing so, it created something extraordinary. An organism that could trade matter for motion, density for distance, flesh for flight. But even now, each flight is a wager. A hawk soaring high may tire before it finds prey. A tern crossing the ocean may meet a storm it cannot outfly. A mother bird feeding her chicks may spend her final strength on their survival. Flight demands courage, not once, but every day. Still, when the balance holds, when wind and wing find harmony, the sky rewards with beauty beyond measure. There is no other form of movement quite like it. The way the air lifts a body and folds it into the rhythm of the planet. Watching a bird vanish into the clouds is to glimpse life at its most refined, its most audacious. Perhaps that is why, even knowing the cost, life keeps returning to the air. Chits, bats, pterosaurs, birds, all have tried, all have paid, all have risen again. For the earth itself seems to love the sight of motion suspended above it, the fluttering silhouettes that turn sunlight into song. Flight was not meant to be easy. It was meant to be earned, and for those who achieved it, the reward was everything. The ability to chase the horizon, to move with the seasons, to see the world not as boundaries, but as paths. It is said that evolution is indifferent, that nature does not dream. But when you watch a bird crossing the vastness of sky, when you think of the energy that burns through its heart and the precision that guides its feathers, it is hard not to believe that the earth in its own quiet way wanted this. Because through all the cost, all the risk and hunger, every exhausted heartbeat and trembling glide, the sky still whispers the same invitation it always has. Fly if you can. The freedom is worth the price. The Archosaur lineage, a bridge between sky and river. Long before birds carved their songs into the air and crocodiles slipped like green shadows through the rivers, there was a family, a lineage so ancient that it predates the flight of feathers and the patience of scales. They were the archosaurs, the ruling reptiles, and from their shared bloodline emerged both the lords of the land and the masters of the sky. When we look at a bird perched on a branch, or a crocodile resting half submerged in still water, we are not looking at opposites but at echoes, two surviving verses of the same ancient poem. The earth of their ancestors was young and restless. The Triassic sun burned hot on vast floodplains and forests where evolution was busy dreaming in bone and scale. Among the earliest archosaurs there was diversity beyond imagining, creatures that walked upright or crawled low, some with slender limbs built for running, others armored like tanks. They lived between two worlds, the water that had birthed life and the air that would one day host it. From these forms came two paths, one leading eventually to the crocodilians, the other toward the dinosaurs, and from them the birds. What makes this family extraordinary is how much of it remains visible in both branches. The crocodile, though ancient and seemingly unchanged, carries in its heartbeat the same rhythm as a bird's. Both share a four-chambered heart, rare among reptiles, dividing blood cleanly into oxygenated and deoxygenated streams. Both breathe with unidirectional airflow, air passing through the lungs in one continuous direction, maximizing oxygen intake. This is no accident of coincidence. It is inheritance, a legacy of efficiency born in an age of volcanic skies and predatory speed. Their eggs, too, tell the same story. The archosaurs were among the first to encase their offspring in hard-shelled eggs, a design both fragile and eternal. Within that shell, the embryo could breathe, protected from the dampness of soil and the roughness of time. The shell was porous enough to exchange air, strong enough to guard the pulse of life. Both birds and crocodiles still build nests to cradle their young, still guard those fragile worlds with ferocity and care. It is easy to forget that crocodiles, with their armored hides and ancient eyes, are devoted parents. A mother crocodile will bury her eggs in a mound of vegetation and guard them through heat and storm. When the time comes, and the hatchlings call from within the eggs, she will gently unearth them, even carry them in her jaws to the water's edge. Her care continues long after birth. She stays close, protective, her eyes scanning the surface for threats. There is tenderness behind those reptilian eyes, the same fierce guardianship that would one day appear in a mother bird shielding her nest from rain. The continuity is uncanny. The archosaur spirit, resilient, attentive, and adaptive, survived every extinction the Earth could muster. It endured the mass dying at the end of the Triassic, the great darkness that ended the dinosaurs, the rise and fall of continents and climates. Through it all, the line held. Today its two great heirs continue that ancient conversation, one beneath the sun, the other beneath the surface. Watch a crocodile in still water, and you see patience incarnate. Its eyes break the surface like tiny golden moons, unblinking, knowing its body, motionless, betrays nothing of its power until the moment it strikes. Then, with an explosion of force, it becomes a blur, a machine of muscle and instinct, pure precision. It is strength honed by time, the same precision that once allowed theropods to hunt and birds to dive. The crocodile is not slow, it is deliberate. Its calm is strategy, its silence, survival. Now lift your gaze to the sky. There a hawk circles, its body taut with energy, eyes locked on the ground. It too waits, motionless except for the faint adjustments of its wings. When it sees movement, it drops, a dive that mirrors the crocodile's strike, fast, focused, unstoppable. One hunts through air, the other through water, yet their predatory elegance feels like kinship, two reflections of the same ancestral design. The connection runs deeper than shape or habit. It is written in bone. Both birds and crocodiles share structural patterns that trace back to the archosaurs, openings in the skull called antorbital fenestrae, specialized ankle joints for efficient movement, and similar arrangements of pelvis and limb bones. These similarities are not superficial, they are signatures of descent, clues left by the architects of evolution. Even their behavior carries whispers of the same blueprint. Both display territorial calls, deep bellows from crocodiles, melodic songs from birds broadcasting presence across air or water. Both guard territory and court with ritual. Crocodiles vibrate the surface of the river, in low-frequency displays that ripple like thunder beneath the waves. Birds puff feathers, dance and sing. Each speaks the language of performance, written in the grammar of instinct. And yet, from their shared beginning, their paths diverged into opposite directions. One line reached downward, deeper into the slow pulse of the river, while the other ascended, chasing sunlight and sky. Crocodiles grew denser, heavier, more armored, their bodies built for ambush and endurance. Birds grew lighter, hollow-boned, and feverishly fast, their bodies built for motion and heat. It is as if evolution split the ancient archosaur heart into two halves, one that beats in sunlight, the other in shadow. Both ways of life are valid, both brilliant responses to the demands of the planet. The crocodile thrives by waiting. The bird thrives by wandering. The crocodile lives for decades in the same stretch of river. The bird may see 3 continents before a single season ends, but each carries the same ancient wisdom that survival is not about shape, but about adaptation. To fly or to swim is only a matter of method. The will to endure is the true inheritance. In the crocodile's world, time moves differently. Generations pass above it, forests rise and fall, ice ages come and go, and it remains largely unchanged. Its lineage remembers the Triassic as if it were yesterday, its body is a memory of the age of giants, its patience a monument to that lost world. When it rests beneath a sun that once shone on dinosaurs, it carries within its blood the rhythm of the ancient earth. Birds, by contrast, live fast and bright. Their hearts beat like drums, their lives brief and blazing. But both creatures are ancient in their own way, 2 expressions of endurance through transformation. The bird evolved by reinventing itself, the crocodile by perfecting its form. The sky and river became 2 canvases for the same ancestral genius. To think that these 2, so different in every visible way, once shared an ancestor, is to realize how flexible life truly is. Evolution does not write with a single hand. It sketches possibilities, allows them to branch, and lets time decide which will survive. From one lineage came creatures that defied gravity, from the other, those that mastered stealth. One breathes in rhythm with the wind, the other with the current. But both are children of the same fire, descendants of the archosaurs who once ruled both realms. Even their eyes tell the story. Crocodiles have vertical pupils, narrowing in sunlight, widening in dusk, a hunter's lens for shifting worlds. Birds, meanwhile, see farther, clearer, sharper. Many perceive ultraviolet light, colors invisible to us, hues that once shimmered on dinosaur feathers. Each eye, in its own way, sees the world the archosaurs left behind. There is something almost poetic in the symmetry of their fates. When the great extinction came and most dinosaurs vanished, the lineage of birds and crocodiles endured. They survived not through strength, but through flexibility. Crocodiles found sanctuary in rivers, in the quiet persistence of water. Birds took refuge in the sky, adapting to new climates, new diets, new dangers. Where mammals began their own ascent, these 2 held their ancient posts, one as guardian of the deep, the other as messenger of the air. If you watch them long enough, you can feel that they still recognize each other. A heron wades through a river where a crocodile lies hidden beneath the surface. They move differently, but understand the same rules. Stillness, patience, precision. The heron steps carefully, aware of the shadows below. The crocodile watches, eyes calm, waiting. There is no malice, only acknowledgement. Each is master of its own element, descended from the same source, bound by the same quiet knowledge of time. The archosaurs were not creatures of chance. They were architects of endurance. They gave the world a blueprint that could survive anything: fire, ice, darkness, and the whims of fate. Birds and crocodiles, their living descendants, are proof of that mastery. Between them lies the story of adaptation's 2 great strategies: to change completely or to change not at all. The bird is evolution's dream of transformation, a creature that redefined its body to embrace the air. The crocodile is evolution's memory, a creature so perfect in its design that it needed no revision. Together they form the full circle of survival. Perhaps that is the true genius of the archosaurs, not the grandeur of their age, but the endurance of their spirit. Through their children, the sky and the river remain alive, mirroring each other's grace. When a crocodile rises slowly from the water, sunlight sliding across its scales, and when a bird lifts into that same light, wings shimmering, both are answering the same ancient command, whispered through time. Live on, adapt, remember where you came from. So the next time you stand at the edge of a river and see a heron take flight above a crocodile's wake, pause and listen. The air and the water are speaking the same language, the language of survival, of lineage, of time's unbroken thread. The archosaurs are still here, breathing through feathers and through scales, through wings that touch the clouds and jaws that rest in the mud. The world changed, but they did not vanish. The river and the sky still carry their pulse, and somewhere beneath the rustle of wings and the ripple of water, the earth still murmurs to its two oldest children. One of you will watch from above, and one from below. Together you will remember me, the human connection, learning to fly from the masters of the sky. For as long as humans have looked upward, the sky has been both invitation and mystery. It is there every morning, limitless and untouchable, filled with motion and song. We watched the birds before we even had words for wonder, their effortless rising, their tilting wings, the way they vanished into light, as if weight were a myth. To walk the earth and look at them must have felt like envy, given full. The dream of flight was born not in machines but in hearts lifted by feathers. For most of our history we could only imitate with imagination. The first myths of flight belonged to wings of wax and faith. Icarus chasing the sun, eagles carrying gods, cranes delivering souls between worlds. In every story, humans were the apprentices, the birds the teachers. Flight meant freedom, but it also meant wisdom, balance, and daring. The sky was not merely space, it was possibility. Then came observation. People began to watch, not only with wonder, but with science. The earliest thinkers saw patterns, how birds tilted their wings into wind, how they used their tails as rudders, how air curved around their feathers. Long before humans understood aerodynamics, the birds had already written the physics of flight in the air itself. Among those who watched most closely was a man who dreamed in lines and wings, Leonardo da Vinci. Centuries before engines or metal, he stood beneath the Tuscan sky, sketching the beating of wings. His notebooks overflowed with the anatomy of flight, bones of birds, angles of feathers, the spiral flow of air around them. He believed that by studying their design, humans could borrow a piece of their mastery. Once you have tasted flight, he wrote, you will forever walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward. Da Vinci's machines were beautiful, mechanical birds built of imagination and geometry. His ornithopter, a great winged device with levers and pulleys, tried to mimic the movement of feathers and muscle, though it never flew, its spirit did. In his sketches you can feel the reverence, the belief that flight was not just mechanics but poetry, an act of grace learned from nature itself. He studied how birds shifted their wings in turns, how they adjusted the camber, the gentle curve that made air rush faster above than below. That curve, the secret of lift, would not find its true application until centuries later, but Leonardo had already glimpsed it. For hundreds of years after him, humans continued to dream. We built kites that danced like sparrows and balloons that drifted like clouds. But our wings were still crude, our understanding incomplete. We could rise, but not control. We could drift, but not soar. The birds remained our silent masters, gliding above with the ease of breathing, while we struggled below with ropes and gas and guesswork. Then, in the early years of the 20th century, two brothers stood on the windswept dunes of North Carolina and watched the gulls. Wilbur and Orville Wright were bicycle makers, men of patience and precision, fascinated not just by machines, but by balance. They noticed that the secret of flight was not brute force, but harmony, the subtle relationship between lift, drag, and control. The birds did not fight the air, they spoke its language. The brothers began to experiment. They built gliders, light and skeletal, their frames covered with fabric stretched tight like skin. But instead of flapping, they focused on shape. Watching birds twist their wingtips in midair, they invented wing warping. a method of bending the wings slightly to turn and balance, just as a hawk adjusts its feathers in a breeze. And then one winter morning in 1903, humanity left the ground. The first flight at Kitty Hawk was small, a brief hop across sand, shorter than the wingspan of a modern jet. But it changed everything. For the first time, humans had achieved controlled, powered flight. The machine rose, dipped, then steadied itself, guided by the same principles that had carried birds for millions of years. The air curved over the wings, pressure dropped, lift was born, and for 12 unforgettable seconds, humanity became a species of the sky. It is easy to think of this as a triumph of engineering, but it was also a triumph of observation. The Wright brothers had not conquered nature. They had collaborated with it. Every detail of their invention whispered of birds. The curved airfoil, the lightweight frame, the tail for steering, the balance of lift and drag. Even their instincts mirrored the creatures they studied. When they learned to turn mid-air, they did so not by inventing, but by imitating. The wings of the plane flexed gently, just as feathers flex in flight. From that moment, everything changed. The sky was no longer a boundary. It was a beginning. But even as machines grew larger and faster, we never truly forgot our teachers. Engineers studied the albatross to design efficient long-range gliders, the swallow for agility, the eagle for strength. The study of biomimicry, learning from life's designs, became a guiding philosophy of invention. The birds had already solved every problem of flight through evolution: lift, stability, propulsion, and weight. Humans only needed to listen. The elegance of feathers, for example, inspired composite materials strong, light, and flexible. The hollow bones of birds became the blueprint for lightweight frames. Their lungs, with their continuous flow of air, guided engineers in creating cooling systems for high-performance engines. Even modern drones borrow their stability algorithms from the way birds adjust mid-flight, sensing turbulence with tiny shifts of body and wing. We owe our skies to them. And perhaps it is not only their mechanics that we borrowed, but their philosophy. For the bird, flight is not simply travel. It is expression. Each wing beat carries intention. A gull rising on a thermal, a falcon stooping in precision, a crane tracing migration lines across the clouds. When humans took to the air, we inherited that same quiet poetry. Every pilot, every astronaut, every dreamer of the sky feels it. The pull of the horizon, the hum of engines replacing the whisper of feathers. Even our language still bows to them. We say we take off, soar, dive, glide, hover, all borrowed from the lexicon of wings. We design airports like nests and name our machines after birds: falcon, eagle, albatross, skylark, the metaphors of flight, freedom, courage, transcendence, have become the metaphors of being human. But with every ascent, there is reflection. Flight, for birds and for humans alike, is both privilege and peril. We learned how to fly, but we still seek their effortless grace. Even our most advanced aircraft cannot turn with the precision of a swallow or land with the softness of an owl. Birds continue to outfly us not in distance, but in elegance. They remain the true masters of the element we only borrow, and yet, what a gift they gave us. Without them, we might never have looked upward and wondered. Without the cranes crossing dawn skies or the hawks riding invisible currents, we might never have imagined freedom beyond the ground. Every machine that hums above a city, every contrail drawn across the sunset, is a feather's shadow cast through time. The connection runs deeper than metal and mathematics. To study birds is to study possibility. Da Vinci saw it in the curve of wings. The Wright brothers in the tilt of air. Each found not just a blueprint, but a mirror. For the act of flight, whether by feather or engine, is an act of faith, to trust invisible forces, to balance between falling and soaring, to surrender control in exchange for grace. When we fly, we are not imitating birds so much as joining them. We enter their element, where weight becomes suggestion, where motion is shaped by wind's invisible hands. There, above the ground, the distinction between invention and nature fades. The airplane and the albatross are two expressions of the same truth, that life yearns to move beyond limits. Even in space, Our latest sky, the echoes of avian design persist. The sleek curves of spacecraft mirror the contours of wings, the balance of lift and drag replaced by the harmony of thrust and vacuum. Each new frontier begins with the same gesture, something rising against gravity, guided by the dreams first written in feathers. And so, from the sketches of Leonardo to the flight to Kitty Hawk to the great silver bodies that now cross oceans, the story is continuous. Humanity did not invent flight. We remembered it. We learned from the masters who had been writing its lessons in the wind for 100 million years. Next time you see a bird lift from the ground, take a moment. Watch how its body flexes, how the air bends around it, how effortlessly it balances the impossible. There, in that motion, lies the origin of our own greatest dream. Every plane that hums above us, every rocket that rises, every child who tilts a hand against the wind, is answering the same whisper the earth once gave to its feathered children. Fly if you can. The sky is your inheritance. Share it. And as we rise into that inheritance, metal wings following feathered ones, the line between imitation and inspiration blurs. For in the end, to fly is not to defy nature, but to join it. Humanity has always looked upward not to escape the earth, but to understand it, to mirror its grace in our own fragile way. We learned to fly because we watched the world and listened to its oldest teachers. The birds showed us how to lift our eyes beyond the horizon, how to turn wind into motion and motion into wonder. The dream began with them, and through them it continues. Because long before humans ever touched the air, the sky was already alive with instruction. And somewhere, even now, as the engines fade and the sun dips below the clouds, a bird glides past, unbothered, unchanged, a quiet reminder of where the dream began. The fossil mysteries, gaps, shadows, and questions, still in stone. The earth remembers almost everything. Every tide, every storm, every life that brushed against its surface leaves an impression somewhere, yet only a few are ever found. The rest are lost to time, swallowed by heat, crushed by pressure, scattered into dust. The fossil record, vast as it feels, is only a whisper of all that has lived. Scientists estimate that perhaps 1%, just a fraction of Earth's creatures, have been preserved and discovered. The other 99% remain silent, their stories locked in stone, not yet split, in layers not yet touched. And so, when we speak of the evolution of birds, of how flight first began, we speak with reverence and with uncertainty, because for all we have uncovered, the air between facts is still full of mystery. Fossils give us glimpses, not answers. They are pages torn from a novel whose middle chapters are missing. Sometimes the fossils are breathtaking in their clarity. Every feather etched, every bone in perfect alignment, as if frozen mid-motion. Other times they are incomplete, a jaw without a skull, a wing without a body, a single footprint in hardened mud. From these fragments, we try to reconstruct entire worlds. It is both science and imagination, deduction and dreaming. The gaps are not small. Between the earliest dinosaurs and the first true birds stretch millions of years of evolution, with many steps still unseen. We have snapshots of creatures that seem to bridge the gap, animals with feathers but teeth, with claws on their wings, with tails long and bony, but the story between them remains patchy, like light breaking through leaves. Somewhere in those missing strata lies the answer to how Earth learned to fly. That is where the great questions begin. How exactly did flight begin? Was it born in the trees or on the ground? Two great theories have danced around this question for decades, each carrying its own beauty and logic, each incomplete. The first, the trees down hypothesis, imagines small, feathered dinosaurs clambering up tree trunks, leaping from branch to branch, their arms outstretched. The forest, full of predators, offered safety and height. To descend without falling, these creatures began to glide, their feathers catching the air like parachutes. Over time, the leaps became longer, the feathers stronger, the glides more controlled. In this vision, flight is an extension of falling, a gradual mastery of descent until descent itself became ascent. There is something poetic in this view. Life, afraid of the ground, learning to trust the air. The forest becomes a classroom, each tree a lesson in balance and courage. The first flyers would have moved like leaves in wind, discovering lift by accident, then by instinct, then by evolution. Their wings were not built for flight. They were built for survival, and survival in its patient artistry found the sky. The second theory, the ground-up hypothesis, tells a different story. Here, the ancestors of birds were not climbers but runners, small theropods sprinting across the plains, chasing insects or escaping larger hunters. As they ran, their feathered arms pumped for balance, generating lift that lightened their bodies. Over generations, these motions refined into flapping. Eventually, the lift became enough to extend a jump, then enough to glide, and finally enough to fly. In this vision, flight is not born from falling but from running. Momentum turned into miracle. The ground itself becomes the teacher, the air an ally discovered through speed. Each leap is a test, each sprint a rehearsal for flight. The creatures that first rose from the earth did not flee the ground. They carried it with them, the memory of running, written into every beat of their wings. Both stories are possible, both are beautiful, and both are incomplete. For every fossil that seems to support one idea, another emerges that whispers the opposite. Some early flyers show claws suited for climbing, others have legs built for sprinting. Some fossils show long flight feathers, ideal for gliding between trees. Others reveal compact, muscular wings, better for powered takeoff. Nature, ever the experimenter, seems to have tried both. Perhaps flight did not come from one path, but many, 1,000 small attempts converging on the same dream. That question, one lineage or many, remains one of the most haunting in paleontology. Did birds evolve from a single branch of small theropods, refining their wings through a continuous line of adaptation? Or were there several experiments, multiple species flirting with flight at different times and places, some succeeding, most vanishing? The fossils we have suggest a chorus rather than a solo. Across the Mesozoic world, many creatures bore feathers, some for insulation, some for display, some for gliding. Feathers appear not as a singular invention but as a shared theme, adapted in parallel across related species. It is as if evolution, upon discovering the thread of a feather, could not resist weaving it into multiple designs. If this is true, then the birth of flight was not one event, but a symphony, a convergence of chance and change, repeated until one lineage perfected it. That lineage, of course, became the birds we know, but the others, those whose wings carried them only partway, remain ghosts in the fossil record, half-remembered experiments lost to stone. Every fossil, even the most complete, is a doorway into uncertainty. For every bone that tells us what was, 1,000 unrecorded lives leave us wondering what might have been. Did some feathered dinosaurs fly clumsily between trees, never quite mastering control? Did others glide for a generation only for the trait to vanish? Were there lineages that could hover briefly, or leap higher than their rivals, or fan their feathers in display that doubled as the first sparks of aerodynamics? The stone is silent, and so we guess. There is humility in that silence. The earth does not reveal her secrets all at once. She lets us find fragments, enough to inspire curiosity, but never enough to satisfy it. The missing pieces are not failures of discovery, they are invitations to wonder. For every fossil we lift from rock, another 1,000 crumble unseen beneath our feet, carrying answers we will never read. Scientists, with their brushes and chisels, do not simply excavate bones, they excavate stories. They trace the ridges of feathers fossilized in ash and imagine motion. They measure the hollow of a bone and infer breath. A single claw can suggest a life of climbing, a pattern of wear on teeth can reveal diet, and a curve in a limb can hint at movement through air. Each fragment is both evidence and riddle. Sometimes the riddles grow contentious. For decades, scholars argued over the relationship between birds and dinosaurs. Some saw them as cousins, others as direct descendants. The discovery of feathered dinosaurs in China seemed to settle the question, but even now debates persist in the details. Which species truly took the first flight? How many independent experiments in air were there? What fossils remain buried in stone, waiting to complicate what we think we know? There are other mysteries too. Why did flight evolve when it did, and not earlier? The Earth had long been home to flying insects. even flying reptiles like pterosaurs. What made this particular branch of dinosaurs follow the same path? Was it environmental change, competition, or something more subtle? An evolutionary chain reaction set off by one small advantage that led to the sky? Perhaps the most haunting mystery is not the beginning of flight, but the endings, the countless lineages that never made it beyond the threshold. For every fossil that shows progress, another reveals a dead end. Wings that could glide but not flap, feathers that shone but did not lift. Nature, patient and ruthless, lets most of her experiments fade, keeping only what works. The stone remembers the failures too, though quietly. And still, for all we do not know, there is beauty in the search. The fossil record, incomplete as it is, remains one of humanity's most profound windows into time. Each new discovery, no matter how small, reshapes the landscape of understanding. A single feather impression, a faint trace of bone, can upend an entire theory. The story of flight continues to be written, not in grand revelations, but in fragile clues. The brushstroke of ash, crossed stone, the ghost of a shadow that once beat the air. In the end, perhaps the mystery itself is what keeps the story alive. If we knew everything, the fossils would lose their power to move us. Instead, they stand as reminders of how much remains beyond our reach, how life is vast, complex, and infinitely creative. The gaps between fossils are not emptiness, but space for imagination, for the next discovery, for the next whisper from the past. Imagine holding one of those ancient stones in your hand. It feels cool, heavy, silent, but within it lies a story older than language, older than thought, a story of courage, of failure, of persistence. You might see the faint outline of feathers, or the curve of a bone, or nothing at all, yet somewhere in that stone is the memory of flight's first heartbeat. The earth has buried her secrets well, but not forever. With every dig, with every discovery, we come closer, not to final answers, but to a clearer conversation with time. The fossils speak, and though their language is fractured, it is beautiful. It tells us that even with missing chapters, the story continues. And if the earth herself could speak of these mysteries, perhaps she would whisper what she always has to those who search too eagerly. You have found one feather of a great wing. Keep looking. The rest is still waiting. So we do. Generation after generation, we keep listening to the stone, brushing away the dust, searching the silence, because somewhere, buried deep within that 1%, lies the moment when the earth learned not just to hold life, but to let it rise. The lesson of adaptation, small changes, great transformations. The story of life has never been about perfection. It has always been about adjustment. Tiny shifts in form and rhythm that, over deep time, become revolutions. The earth never demands sudden transformation. It asks for persistence, for patience, for the courage to change by degrees. And nowhere is that lesson more profound than in the story of how the dinosaurs became birds. From the smallest beginnings, a filament of down, a tentative leap, a glimmer of possibility, life found its way to the air. What began as warmth became lift. What began as survival became grace. Every feather, every hollow bone, every heartbeat in the chest of a sparrow or an eagle is a record of that quiet persistence evolution, not as a single leap, but as a million small steps forward. Picture the world as it was in the age of giants. Great reptiles ruled the land, immense and unstoppable, their footsteps shaking the ground. Yet, hidden among them were the small and fragile theropods no larger than crows, darting between ferns, feeding on insects, sleeping under leaves. Their size made them vulnerable, but also adaptable. While the giants relied on power, the small ones relied on change. A few of these small creatures carried an unexpected gift, threads of soft filament along their bodies, simple proto-feathers that trapped warmth and shimmered in sunlight. They were not yet wings, only insulation against the chill, camouflage in the shadows, perhaps signals of courtship. But those threads were the first quiet innovation, the first whisper of what the future might hold. The earth, in her patient way, rewarded flexibility. The world was shifting, climates cooling, forests thickening, predators multiplying. Those who could adjust survived. Each generation, The filaments grew longer, finer, stronger. They began to shape air, to flicker in wind, to catch lift for an instant longer. Each small change insignificant on its own, built upon the last, until one day, air became ally instead of obstacle. From that soft beginning, down and warmth came feathers, balance, and the dream of flight. It was not a straight path. Evolution does not climb ladders. It explores. It stumbles forward, turns back, tries again. There were failures and dead ends, countless species that leapt but never soared. But even those missteps mattered, for each carried a fragment of possibility. Over millions of years, the experiments converged. Gliding became flapping, running became rising, and the ground-born hunters of the Mesozoic slowly reshaped themselves into the flyers of the Cretaceous skies. When we trace that history, we see that greatness comes not from sudden invention, but from slow persistence. A single adaptation, a feather here, a lighter bone there, did not seem remarkable in its moment. Yet, together, they rewrote what life could do. It is a reminder that progress is rarely visible in its making. It unfolds in silence through small acts of resilience. And then the world changed again. 66 million years ago, an asteroid struck the Earth. The sky turned to fire. Forests burned. Seas rose in steam. The sunlight dimmed beneath clouds of dust. And the reign of the dinosaurs, 3 times older than humanity itself, collapsed into silence. Almost all of them perished. The great tyrants, the horned giants, the long-necked wanderers, all were undone, not by weakness but by circumstance. The planet itself had shifted, and strength could not save what could not adapt. Among the ashes and the cooling storms, the small ones, the feathered, the quick, the cautious, found ways to survive. They had already been shaped for endurance. Their hollow bones made them light, their feathers insulated them from cold, their quick metabolisms let them stay active when larger creatures slowed. Many could eat seeds and insects that remained when the forests fell. Some could burrow, some could hide. In those dark years when the earth trembled and life seemed to end, they endured because they had already learned how to bend without breaking. Those survivors were not the mightiest of the dinosaurs, but they were the most adaptable, and from their lineage came all the birds that fill our skies today, more than 10,000 species, scattered across every continent, from the frozen poles to volcanic islands, from city rooftops to deserts. Each one carries the legacy of that small miracle, the persistence of change. The hummingbird hovering before a flower, the owl drifting silent through moonlight, the albatross gliding over endless seas, all are descendants of those fragile survivors. Each one is a monument to the idea that small changes multiplied through time can transform the fate of worlds. To look at a bird now is to see deep history made living. Beneath the feathers, its skeleton still bears the marks of its dinosaur ancestors. The fused wishbone, the 3-fingered wings, the familiar curve of the hips. Evolution never erases. It rewrites. Within every sparrow is the echo of a hunter that once walked the Jurassic forests. Within every eagle is the memory of a creature that learned to climb, leap, and finally soar. The miracle is not that birds survived, but that they thrived. They did not merely endure extinction, they reinvented themselves after it. As the world healed from disaster, they diversified, finding niches in every corner of the recovering earth. Some grew small and quick, darting through branches, others grew large and powerful, rulers of open sky. Their diversity became their armor. In the face of ruin, variety was resilient, and so from catastrophe, the age of birds began. If we listen closely, the lesson they carry is one of quiet power. Adaptation is the language of survival. The smallest change, a new feather, a shift in diet, a different rhythm of breath, can become the difference between extinction and endurance. Life does not always reward the strong, it rewards the responsive. Even now, birds remind us of this truth every day. They migrate across impossible distances, reading magnetic fields and the curve of stars. They nest in cities, on cliffs, in deserts, adjusting their songs and habits to new environments. Some mimic sounds of machines, others weave plastic and wire into their nests, turning human refuse into shelter. They continue to evolve in real time, adapting to our changing planet with the same quiet creativity that once carried their ancestors through darkness. There is poetry in their persistence. The same lineage that once survived the fall of the dinosaurs now lives in harmony with the turning of the seasons, mapping the world with memory and instinct. When a swallow returns to the same nest year after year, it reenacts millions of years of endurance. When a goose rises from the water, wings cutting through fog, it is echoing the same movement that once lifted its ancient kin from danger to sky. Their story is not just one of survival, but of transformation through humility. The birds did not outfight extinction, they outlasted it by becoming something new. They did not resist change, they embraced it, allowing evolution to sculpt them anew for a world that had shifted. In their bones is a truth that reaches beyond biology, that flexibility is a form of strength, and that small adaptations multiplied over time become destiny. Even the feather, delicate and transient, is a symbol of that truth. Each one grows, serves and falls away, replaced by another, yet the form endures. The feather is the perfect metaphor for adaptation, temporary in substance, eternal in purpose. The bird renews itself without losing its identity, as life itself does across eons. And so, when we look at the sky filled with wings, we are not just seeing birds, we are seeing survival perfected into art. The Earth's oldest lineage of hunters became its most graceful navigators, their power redefined through lightness. They remind us that evolution's greatest magic is not creation from nothing, but transformation through patience. The same principle holds for us too, though in quieter ways. Every small act of resilience, every adjustment to change, every renewal of hope carries the same evolutionary spirit. To adapt is to continue. To continue is to live. The birds teach us that no transformation is too small to matter. A shift in habit, a new way of seeing, a single act of endurance. These are the feathers from which flight is built. Life has always favored the ones who listen, who watch the world, and move with it, rather than against it. The dinosaurs that survived were those that could shrink, warm their bodies, change their diets, follow new rhythms. In that adaptation lay immortality. The meteor ended an era, but it could not end evolution. Today, as dawn breaks, the air fills with their descendants' songs. Each note is an ancient memory, made sound, the voice of creatures who learned to turn disaster into opportunity. The world they inherited was one of ash and emptiness, yet from it they built a planet of color and motion. 10,000 species, each an answer to the same question: how do you survive when everything changes? The answer is simple, and yet eternal. You change too, from the soft down of a Jurassic hunter to the sweeping wings of an eagle, from survival through disaster to symphonies of morning light. The journey of the birds is the journey of adaptation itself. They are living proof that the smallest steps, so small they seem invisible in their time, can lead to the greatest transformations. If the earth could speak, perhaps she would look upon their flight and whisper what she once whispered to those small, frightened creatures who huddled in the dark after the fire. Adapt, and you will live. Grow, and you will rise. What begins as a whisper can one day move the wind. And so the birds rose. They filled the world with wings. They became both memory and promise. The last dinosaurs and the first singers of the dawn. From soft feathers to storms of motion, from small changes to boundless skies. The lesson endures that resilience is the most beautiful form of strength, and that in the language of life, even the tiniest adaptation can become a miracle that never ends. Fragility, a resilient but delicate legacy. There is a quiet paradox in the wings that cut through our skies. Birds, the living heirs of dinosaurs, have survived fire, darkness, and the crushing weight of time itself. They endured the extinction that erased almost all of their kind. 66 million years ago, they have watched continents drift, climates shift, and new species rise and vanish. And yet, despite all that resilience, despite a legacy written in endurance and lightness, they are among the most fragile forms of life on Earth today. It is strange, isn't it, that the last descendants of the mightiest creatures the planet ever knew, creatures that shook the ground with their steps, are now beings that weigh only grams, held together by hollow bones and feathers softer than breath. And yet in their fragility lies the same strength that once let their ancestors rule the earth, the ability to live with change. But there is a difference between surviving the indifferent cruelty of nature and facing the carelessness of us. For millions of years, the world tested the birds with storms, hunger, and cold. They adapted, shifted, and found ways to persist. Now they face a different kind of storm, one made of noise, plastic, heat, and the thinning of skies. The same creatures that once rose above catastrophe now struggle to navigate a world remade by human hands. Still, when we look at them, it is hard not to feel awe. Their very existence is improbable, a lineage that passed through the fire of extinction and emerged singing. The birds we see today carry within them the story of the dinosaurs, but also the record of every trial that came after. The fragility we perceive in them is deceptive. It is the fragility of something exquisitely tuned to balance, like the surface tension of water, beautiful, perfect, but easily broken. Watch a swallow in flight. It weighs less than a handful of dust, yet crosses oceans guided by stars. It threads through tempests, navigating wind currents invisible to us. A gust too strong could end its journey, and yet somehow it endures. That is the essence of resilience. Strength that does not look like strength at all. But for all their grace and endurance, modern birds face a new kind of peril, one that adaptation alone cannot easily solve. In the ancient past, catastrophe came from the sky as a single event, a great asteroid ending the age of reptiles. Today, catastrophe descends more quietly, woven into the rhythm of our lives. Forests that once sheltered nests are cleared for cities and fields. Wetlands that once fed flocks are drained and silenced. Skies that once rang with migrations are cut by glass towers and power lines. Oceans once alive with seabird cries fill instead with plastic and oil. The change is gradual, invisible to a single day, but relentless over years. The songs of some species fade, their calls no longer echoed by others. The balance of the air, the very element that lifted their ancestors into flight, grows heavier with heat, thinner with pollution. And yet they keep trying. Each spring, flocks return to places that no longer exist. Instinct drives them to ancestral nesting grounds that have turned to pavement or farmland. They arrive confused, circling where forests once stood. Some adapt, finding cracks in buildings, gutters and bridges where they can build again. Others do not return. The silence grows, one voice at a time. It is a strange tragedy. The creatures that taught us the idea of flight now struggle to find air clean enough to live. When we hold a bird in our hands, if ever we are lucky enough to do so, it feels impossibly light, its heart beating faster than we can imagine, its bones delicate as reeds. We can feel the heat of its life through feathers that barely weigh at all, and in that moment, it feels like holding the essence of time itself, something ancient, fragile, and miraculous. That small, racing heart has survived what continents and kingdoms could not. It has beaten through ice ages and meteor winters. It carries in its rhythm the pulse of the Cretaceous forests, the breath of primeval skies. To lose such a creature is not merely to lose a species. It is to erase a line of memory 6 million years long. But perhaps that is why the birds still matter so deeply to us, why their fragility touches something more profound than beauty. They are proof that life can be both delicate and enduring, both transient and eternal. They remind us that survival is not the absence of vulnerability, but the ability to carry it and still rise. Still, even the most resilient story can be undone by neglect. Across the world, scientists count the vanishing. Since the dawn of the industrial age, bird populations have declined by billions. Some species, once common as daylight, now linger only in memory. The passenger pigeon, which once darkened North American skies in flocks, so vast they took hours to pass, is gone forever, hunted, disturbed, erased in less than a century. The great auk, the Carolina parakeet, the moa, all extinct in the brief blink of human history. Each loss is not only ecological, it is personal. Each bird that disappears takes with it a unique song, a pattern of flight, a behavior shaped by millions of years. The world grows quieter, not only in sound but in spirit. And the tragedy is not only that they are dying, it is that many vanish unseen, their last notes unheard. The birds, however, have never been merely part of the environment. They are the environment's messengers. When their migrations falter, when their numbers shrink, it is not only their story that is in danger, it is ours. Their decline mirrors our own disruptions, the loss of forests, the warming of air, the poisoning of water. They are the Earth's most ancient survivors. And when they struggle, it is the Earth itself that calls for attention. To protect them is to protect what they represent: continuity, adaptation, and balance. The same qualities that once carried their ancestors through extinction can only carry them so far without us. For the first time, the fate of this ancient lineage rests not on the indifference of the cosmos, but on the compassion of another species, ours. We stand at a moment of profound responsibility. In the mirror of their wings, we see both the triumph of life and its fragility. The birds have crossed ages and continents, but they cannot cross the barriers we are building: poisoned rivers, sealed skies, vanishing habitats. They can adjust, but only if we slow the speed of change. They can endure, but only if we allow them the space to breathe. It is a strange irony of the modern world. We build metal birds that soar higher and faster than any living creature, yet the real ones, lighter, older, wiser, struggle to survive beneath our inventions. We have inherited their dream, but forgotten their fragility. And yet, there is still hope. Conservation efforts, however small, echo the ancient rhythm of renewal. Wetlands restored, forests replanted, sanctuaries built, each act of care becomes an answer to history's long silence. When we protect nesting grounds or clean polluted waters, we do not simply preserve birds, we continue an unbroken story that began before humans existed. Some species once thought lost have returned: the whooping crane, the California condor, the Mauritius kestrel. Each recovery is a quiet resurrection, proof that the same resilience that once survived an asteroid can still find a way through our era. But these victories are fragile too, held together by effort and attention. In them there is a lesson that feels almost sacred. Endurance does not mean invulnerability. Strength without protection can vanish as quickly as sound. The birds that fill our skies today are not relics of the past. They are living bridges across time. Their song is the same one that echoed through the forests of the Mesozoic, reshaped by evolution, but unchanged in essence. A call to survive, to move, to continue. Every chirp, every trill, every flight across a sunrise is a reminder that life, no matter how small, carries a lineage of miracles. But even miracles need guardians. When a bird falls silent, an entire story ends. When a forest goes quiet, an entire chapter of evolution closes. Yet, when a single nest survives, when one egg hatches in a place thought barren, the story begins again. That is the fragile balance of life. Always one breath away from loss. Always one breath away from renewal. To hold that balance is to understand our place in it. We are not separate from this story, we are its latest authors. The birds survived fire and ice, but they may not survive indifference. If they vanish, we will lose not just the color and song of the world, but a mirror of what endurance truly means. They are, in every sense, the breath of the earth, light, restless, persistent, and perhaps that is why they move us so deeply. When we hear a bird call through the morning air, it is more than sound, it is the echo of resilience carried through ages, a reminder that life's strength often hides within its softness. The birds have taught us how to rise, how to adapt, how to begin again. Now they ask only for space to live, for skies to cross, for silence to sing into. If the earth could speak through them, she might whisper, "I have given you wings. Do not let them fade." And in that whisper lies both a warning and a promise that the legacy of flight, born from the ashes of dinosaurs, can still endure if we choose to protect the fragile heartbeat that keeps it alive. The birds are the last dream of the age of giants. Their feathers carry time, their flight carries hope, and though they seem light enough to vanish with the next gust of wind, they have outlasted mountains and meteors. They are proof that resilience can be fragile and fragility can be infinite. When one passes overhead, its shadow sweeping across the ground, pause for a moment. Feel the weight of history it carries. the strength of survival, the tenderness of balance. It has taken 66 million years to return to you, this living echo of the dinosaurs, this fragile inheritance of the sky. And when it lifts again, wings spread wide, may you understand what it means, not only to watch, but to protect. For in their flight lies both the memory of the past and the possibility of tomorrow. The birds are still flying. The question is whether we will let them keep the sky. Close your eyes for a moment and listen. Somewhere beyond the hum of the world, a bird sings. It might be the call of a sparrow drifting through an open window, or the faint cry of a gull carried by the wind. It is such a simple sound, light, fleeting, fragile, and yet, within that note, the earth is remembering itself, because that song, that small vibration in the air, began 100 million years ago. It began with creatures covered in downy filaments that rustled in the ancient forests of the Jurassic. It began with small leaps between branches, with glides through the shadows, with a pulse of determination that whispered, "Try again." From those trembling beginnings came the miracle of flight. From the warmth of feathers came freedom. From the dinosaurs came the bird. Each wing beat today is a continuation of that long journey, the journey from land to air, from survival to beauty. The sparrow perched on your balcony, the heron rising from the reeds, the hawk tracing circles in the sky. Each is a living echo of that transformation. They are not separate from the past. They are the past, reimagined. The earth did not lose the dinosaurs, it refined them into something lighter, something that could carry time itself upon its wings. Think of it. What began as soft filaments for warmth became feathers for motion, then colors for attraction, then tools for balance, then wings for flight. What began as running became leaping, then gliding, then soaring. What began as survival became song. Every bird is a poem of small changes written across millions of years, a poem that speaks of patience, of resilience, of life's endless desire to rise. And still, they fly. Through cities and forests, across deserts and oceans, through dawns and dusk. They are the most constant travelers of time, the Earth's oldest dream still moving. 10,000 species, each with its own rhythm, its own verse in the great song of life, some bright as jewels, some plain as shadows, but all carrying the same pulse that once beat in the chests of the dinosaurs. To watch them is to witness time made light. The beating of wings is the sound of history moving through air, soft but unbroken. In the curve of a feather lies the geometry of evolution. In the tilt of a swallow's flight lies the memory of ancient forests. When a bird takes off, it is as if the earth itself exhales, a breath that has lasted for millions of years. And what a gentle triumph it is, not the roar of conquest, but the quiet grace of survival. After fire and extinction, after the fall of giants, life found its way upward again. It did not return to power, it returned to beauty. The birds are the earth's reminder that endurance can be elegant, that change can be art. Sometimes at dusk, when the sky blushes into gold and violet, the air fills with their silhouettes, flocks turning as one, folding and unfolding like a living tide. In that light they seem eternal, yet fleeting. They remind us that all strength carries softness, all history carries breath. The dinosaurs never vanished, they simply learned to sing. And now their descendants write poetry in the sky, each flight a verse, each landing a pause, each call a heartbeat that reaches back through time. The robin in your garden, the crane crossing the horizon, the nightingale hidden in the dark. They are all fragments of a story too vast for words, but not too quiet to feel. Every feather is a syllable of that story, every migration a stanza, every song a refrain. Together they compose the great epic of life's persistence. When you hear their calls, you are hearing more than sound. You are hearing the earth reading its own memory aloud. So tonight, as you rest, let that thought settle like twilight. Let the image of wings fill your mind, the sweep of motion, the hush of feathers, the fading gleam of sun on air. Imagine a single bird gliding across the horizon, its shadow stretching over the last light of day. It is the same sky its ancestors once knew, the same sun, the same unending journey between earth and heaven, from downy threads to soaring wings, from ancient forest to endless sky. The story of birds is the story of life's faith in itself. The dinosaurs dreamed of flight, and through their descendants, the dream came true. Each bird you see is proof that change, though fragile, can become eternal. So when you hear them at dawn or see them drifting against the glow of evening, remember you are witnessing the oldest poem on earth, still being written line by line, wing by wing. And now, as the day fades and the light softens, may that poem carry you gently into rest. Sleep well beneath the same sky they cross. Dream of their wings brushing through golden air. Dream of an earth that has always known how to begin again. The birds will sing you there,